Hello, my name is Ethan Gibson. I am currently taking MSSE 615 at Regis University with Dr. Sherry Plants Master, and I want to go over a specific problem that I have noticed in software engineering, and that is the Swift claim system. And as you can see from my title, Aquitus, it is my solution to the system. So let's talk about the problem. So the problem is that the Swift claimed automated welfare enrollment system, a government contracted software system designed to use AI to process and determine eligibility for state welfare and housing assistance programs. Its goal is to maximize efficiency and minimize fraud. But the high stakes, opaque nature of AI risks creating systematic injustice. Therefore, my proposed solution will be named Aquitus or Equitus. This is Latin for justice, equality, and fairness. The Swift claim problem involves using complex AI to decide access to essential public services such as welfare, housing, or food assistance. The goal of Aquitus is to improve efficiency and reduce human error, minimizing fraud, which is a utilitarian benefit. However, applying a black box system to high stakes decisions carries immense ethical risk, particularly in the danger of algorithmic bias that could disproportionately deny aid to already vulnerable populations. So I want to talk about, you can see in this table here, I've laid out some of the ethical analysis and potential conflicts that exist currently. So some of the ethical frameworks I want to talk about are ACM 1.4, the Justice Fairness Statute. Of course, the benefit here of the current system is that it maximizes distributive justice by processing applications faster and treating all applicants uniformly under the law. That sounds great. But the risk is that of systematic injustice. Algorithmic bias in training data we see in both week 2 of our course and week 8 of our course. I'm going to list those as cycles, could lead to false negatives, systematically denying aid based on factors correlated with poverty or protected class status, thus violating the core principle of justice. The rights deontology. Of course, the benefit is that it upholds a citizen's rights to due process, which is the timely response, and human dignity with prompt assistance. But there is a loss of automation dignity due to the opaque nature of AI, which violates the citizen's right to an explanation, which you'll see in our own non-functional requirement 2, but also we talked about in week 4 of the course. Being denied critical aid without understandable reason undermines dignity and due process. And then, of course, the big one, utilitarianism. The current program does reduce fraud and administrative cost, promoting the common good by ensuring taxpayer money is spent efficiently. But there is a risk of maximizing harm. A focus on cost saving, the greatest good, can inadvertently cause maximum harm, such as starvation and homelessness, to the most vulnerable if the model is biased toward denial, which we've already seen plenty of times in software that have come out in the last so many years. So the ACM Statute 1.2 requires that we avoid harm and must override efficiency. For that statute, avoiding harm is more important than efficiency. Who are the key stakeholders that we want to talk about in this project? Of course, the applicants, the government agency, and the software engineers are my theoretical team. Our primary interest of the applicants will be timely access to life-critical resources such as aid and housing, and the ethical stake or concern that they should have is one of fairness or non-discrimination, transparency, understanding the denial, and dignity, avoiding intrusive data collection. The government, of course, or the agency providing aid, wants efficiency and fraud prevention, cost reduction, and public trust, which are all fine things. But their ethical stake And concern is accountability for automated decisions, justice, ensuring equitable distribution, and compliance, adhering to public law. And my team, of course, our primary interest is technical competence and project success with timely delivery. Some of the ethical stakes or concerns are responsibility, avoiding the responsibility gap we saw in week 6 of our course, and of course professionalism, ensuring safety and quality. So the design is built on the philosophy of ethics-aware software engineering, emphasizing that technical requirements must enforce ethical duties. So we have 3 functional requirements for our software. An automated eligibility check that comes along kind of the current standards. The system should process submitted documents, income, residency, and generate an initial eligibility determination, that being approve, deny, or flag review, so only 3 options. For our ethical justification for this functional requirement, we have utilitarianism, which promotes efficiency and timely resource distribution and duty of care. Our second functional requirement is going to be the human in the loop override. All denials and flagged applications must be routed to a human caseworker for final non-automated review and approval or denial. So approvals just go to an auditable trail, and you can see why they made the decisions they made, but any denial or any flag must automatically go to a human. And so this will theoretically slow down the system slightly, but it gives back the deontology and rights. It preserves human anatomy and responsibility, and it avoids the responsibility gap by ensuring a human is always accountable for the high-stakes denial decision. Essentially, in the end, the AI is pretty much responsible for approvals. And our third functional requirement, a clear denial explanation. Upon denial, the system must generate a human-readable explanation citing the specific input data points and legal statutes used in the denial calculation. So this follows the ethical justification of rights and transparency, upholding the applicant's right to due process and an explanation, a core professional mandate. And then we have 4 non-functional requirements. That is bias mitigation, or fairness, explainability, which is transparency, data, minimization, and accessible UI. For the bias mitigation, the system should employ bias monitoring metrics, ergo disparate impact ratio, that must fall within predefined legal thresholds for all protected classes. This ethical rationale constraint falls under ACM 1.4 justice, enforcing non-discrimination algorithmic fairness. Our non-functional requirement 2, the AI model must use a white box or transparent machine learning techniques, such as decision trees, over black box methods, so like deep neural networks, for eligibility determinations. This ensures the basis of the decision is auditable and comprehensible by the applicant, which comes back to our functional requirement 3. The data minimization essentially says that only data explicitly required by law or for eligibility purposes shall be collected and retained, and they'll only be retained for the specific amount of time legally required, usually about 7 years, and then they'll be destroyed. This falls within the privacy statute, limiting potential harm from breaches and unauthorized data leakage. And when we talk a little about our security measures and privacy measures later, we'll see a few other things we do to do the least harm. And then our 4th non-functional requirement is the accessible UI. So the public-facing application interface must meet the WCAG 2.1 AA audit accessibility standards and support translation into the state's top 5 non-English languages. For our ethical rationales, of course, justice, inclusivity, and constraint, ensuring equitable access to public resources, addressing the digital divide we talked about in week 5. What are the potential ethical risks and challenges of a software like we were talking about? Even with our first non-functional requirement, bias is in the historical training data, reflecting past human prejudice. and it may persist, potentially perpetuating past injustices. Of course, the user has the ability, or there's the risk that they will game the systems. Applicants may quickly learn the model's transparent rules that are required by non-functional requirement 2 and deliberately alter the input data to gain fraudulent eligibility, challenging the utilitarian efficiency goal. So remember, under a program, the only ones sent for a human review are those that are denied or flagged. If an application is approved, is simply approved, and then there is an audit trail. So you could go back and catch that person, but then that requires a secondary check, and so there is a risk of that. And then, of course, the ethical risk and challenge of automated complacency. The human reviewers from functional requirement 2 may become overly reliant on the AI's deny recommendation, failing to apply critical judgment, and therefore exacerbating the responsibility gap problem. It may be very easy to just see a denial come in, and you've seen 85 other denials come in today, and they've all been correct, and just say, okay, fine, that's denied, when in fact there was an error. For the system architecture and ethical design. My architecture is designed to enforce accountability, transparency, and human oversight through layered security and process separation. The ethical influence on our architecture. This architecture is explicitly designed to counter the risk of black box AI and diffuse responsibility. So you can see the specific map where I'll use my mouse here. Let's see that. Oh, it doesn't show up on the screen. Where we start and where we go. So we want transparency and explainability. So we're going to use a transparent machine learning engine or a rules-based system or white box AI over a black box model. This decision directly supports non-functional requirement 2 and the system's right to understand the decision. Human accountability. The human review queue is technically mandatory for denials. This structure prevents the framing out problem talked about in week 6 by ensuring the most critical ethical decision, the denial of life-sustaining aid, always requires a human signature, preserving the principle of human autonomy and accountability. Security fraud prevention. The data validation service is separated from the machine learning engine. It is responsible for cross-referencing input data without external secure government with external secure government databases such as IRS or Social Security. The separation of duty protects the integrity of the process and ensures the focus is on verification, not manipulation. And then in our security and data privacy measures, all personally identifying information, or PII, is stored in a federated encrypted decision database isolated from the public-facing UI. The access will be restricted via a role-based access control to specific authorized caseworkers, enforcing ACM 1.7 honor confidentiality. The system will use pseudonymization for our non-functional requirement 3 for any internal testing or monitoring that does not require PII, severely limiting the risk of a data breach exposing applicants' sensitive information. So, again, doing the least harm. Every human action in our transparency law, the override, the approval, the denial, and every automated decision, the initial scoring, is logged in an immutable audit trail. This ensures non-repudiation and provides a clear mechanism for investigation should a systematic justice failure be detected. I do have a step-by-step, you can view this in the document, of exactly what we want out of our UI make it ethical, and the UX. Basically, it's going to be a simplified step-by-step application that avoids complex jargon, features tooltips for every data request. The denial screen will be mandatory. It's going to give a clear denial explanation, which avoids technical AI jargon. Instead, use simple language, such as your application was denied because your documented income exceeds the threshold of X dollars, which violates statute Y in Section Z. The screen will include a clear button for the request human review. The design must treat the applicant with dignity. A clear denial explanation prevents the user from feeling that there was arbitrary punitive loss of autonomy. It informs them of the exact legal and factual basis for denial, allowing them to correct errors or file an appeal, upholding due process. This interface is designed to meet non-functional requirement 4. This includes a flexible layout that works across older mobile devices, addressing the economic reality of vulnerable populations, and extensive use of simplified low literacy language. Multilingual support ensures justice and access, and non-manipulation. The UI voice persuasive design patterns, the no aggressive status bar, gamification rewards, or time limit nudges designed to pressure the applicant. I actually have a AI generated, you can see down in the bottom corner, Google Gemini helped me generate this. So if you actually look really close at it, it kind of, there are things that are not perfect, such as the word readable under human readable is not readable. But just a very, very basic, easy, not a fancy, anything fancy about the UI. Very basic fields that tell you exactly what they want. There's tooltips next to every single one. What does source of income mean? What does source mean? What does any field will have a field, a tooltip next to it to tell you exactly what counts as income. And then if you can see on the secondary screen for the denial explanation, your denial, a reason for denial, your documented monthly income exceeds the maximum allowed threshold for your household, your size, based on the size you reported. Again, that's AI, so it's kind of rough, but you can see basically they reported an income of $1,800. The maximum allowed under state welfare statute XYZ is $1,500, which is why they were denied. The blue button will automatically allow them to have a secondary view by a human person, and the white button allows a download of the full report so they can get an exact reason of why they were denied. And of course, even if they don't press the blue button, it will automatically be sent to a person. So if there is anything misunderstood, it can be taken care of at that moment. For the data management and privacy, we have a very clear distribution model. From the data acquisition from the input form of the API, it will go to the validation service. The validation service will send it to the transparent machine learning engine. The machine learning engine will send it to a human review queue for denials, or the decision database for approvals. Flagged will also be sent to a human review queue. Approvals are logged, denials are mandatorily routed to a human oversight. The decision database then will be sent to an explanation generator, where the final signed decision and reasoning log are used to generate the functional requirement through denial letter. And all of this will be stored in the audit trail, which is immutable. Separated ledger logs, all steps and human actions. The collection policy will enforce data minimization policy according to non-functional requirement 3. Only collect what is mandated by law for eligibility purposes. Reject collection of non-essential intrusive data like social media profile, communication, metadata. Upholding ACM 1.6 protects privacy and limits potential for algorithmic profiling as relevant to legal decisions. All data is encrypted at rest. Data is partitioned and stored by caseworker. Access levels. Data retention is strictly limited to legally required period, typically 7 years, and destroyed thereafter, and so on. So everything that we can do to limit the harm we hope to do. And we want to be very transparent on consent, understanding that your data will be reviewed by both an automated system, AI, and a human reviewer. For the testing and ethical validations, the testing strategy is a proactive, iterative process aligned with responsible innovation. It uses CARE process from week 6 to formalize ethical risk into measurable metrics and test case before deployment. The first test will, of course, be the bias mitigation test for fairness. The test it tests the model's approval rates against a baseline using synthetic data that varies by protected class, such as race, age, and disability status. The expected ethical outcome is that approval denial rates must not deviate significantly from the human reviewed baseline for any protected class. The due process test. Input a denial scenario and verify the system generates a clear denial explanation that is understandable using the Fletch-Kincaid grade level score of 6 or lower. The explanation must be accurate, specific, and meet readability requirements. For the automation complacency test, present human reviewers from functional requirement 2 present a batch of deny recommendations that include several obvious false negatives. The human reviewers must override the AI recommendation in 90% or more of the known false negative cases, confirming the integrity with the human in the loop process. So, we want to describe how would you measure the ethical impact of the system. The ethical impact will be measured through an ongoing ethical key performance indicators monitored by an agency or external auditors. The first will, of course, be the Disparate Impact Index, a continuous monitoring metric measuring the ratio of denial rates between the most and least approved demographic groups, with the goal being to maintain a ratio close to 1.0 with no significant disparate impact. The Audit Fidelity Score measures the percentage of AI flagged applications where the human reviewer changed or overrided the initial automation decision. The goal being a high score, actually. Ergo, 10 to 15% override rate is desirable as it indicates the human in the loop is actively exercising accountability and preventing complacency. And then the appeal success rate. Measure the rate at which the applicants successfully appeal an initial automated denial. A high appeal success rate indicates poor, unjust algorithmic performance and a failure of the justice lens. And of course, I do want to make my AI fair use statement. I did use Gemini 2.5 Flash as a writing assistant to review grammar, ensure professional tone, structure the large design document, and verify adherence to strict length and formatting constraints. All analysis, original ethical conflicts, system designs, functional and non-functional requirements, and final recommendations are my own original work. I maintained full intellectual control over the arguments and conclusions presented. Thank you very much for listening. I welcome you to offer any questions if this was an actual, you were sitting in front of me. I'll take questions at this point. But yeah, thank you for listening.